So, I was reading some headlines regarding the Israel-Hamas war that's been going on in Gaza at the moment, and I saw this headline here. Israel is using artificial intelligence to help pick bombing targets in Gaza. And I said to myself, I wonder what could go wrong here. A lot, apparently. It turns out that on the same date that the article about them using AI to identify strike targets, news came out that they struck an aid truck. I believe this was run by the WCK, the World Central Kitchen. They're a privatized, at least from what I can tell, privatized outfit that gives aid to Palestinians who are living in Gaza. It said that other than the UN RWA, they were the most prominent group giving out aid to the civilians who are living in Gaza. And this appears to be a precision strike. You can actually see the precision of which this was struck. Like you can see very clearly, if you're not listening, there is just a great big hole in this truck that is right over somebody's seat. So they very clearly struck this truck in a deliberate attempt to kill someone who's on the inside. Didn't really come off as an accidental strike by a big bomb or something that ended up incinerating the truck. It was a lot more planned or at least premeditated than that. As soon as it happened, the World Central Kitchen leader, Jose Andres, accused Israel of the strike indeed being a direct attack, which does kind of make some sense. And another aspect of this, I'm not sure if it's in this article, but the WCK and the IDF were in constant communication about where the trucks were, so that the trucks would not be struck. I guess I don't have an article for it. But since the strike happened, the WCK decided to pull out all operations in Gaza because they were like, hey, we can no longer guarantee safety for our workers in the trucks, which is a completely reasonable take, right? It's a war zone, a literal war zone. And the last thing that you want is the people that you're collaborating with to blow you to bits as you're trying to give, food and water to the civilians who are living in Gaza. So that's completely reasonable, and that makes sense that they would do that. From what I've heard, the leader of the WCK's words to Israel were somewhat harsh, but it's also understandable, right? We're talking about dealing with the deaths of your own workers who are just trying to do good things for the people of Palestine or Gaza, right? Now, turns out that the IDF did an internal investigation and they fired multiple senior officers. And they, in general, blamed the strike on a case of mistaken identification. And so we've got the cliff notes here from Forbes. It says the IDF said it dismissed two senior officers, the brigade fire support commander and the brigade chief of staff, respectively officers with the ranks of major and colonel in reserve, from their positions after a probe into the attack revealed serious violations of standard operating procedures. The IDF said the attack on a convoy of cars operated by the World Central Kitchen should not have occurred, and that those who approved the strike were convinced that they were targeting armed Hamas operatives and not aid workers. It was a grave mistake stemming from a serious failure due to mistaken identification, errors in decision-making, and an attack contrary to the standard operating procedures, the IDF statement said. That's interesting because it's those standard operating procedures that keep these things from happening. Many people accuse the IDF of just bombing civilians for fun. It's not what the IDF does. There's a whole chain of command where things have to go through. You identify a target, you have to go up the chain of command saying, can we shoot this person? They say yes or no. And then it goes back down and they go and kill the person. That's generally how these things go. You can't just have some dude going pew, 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 willy-nilly, which is a good thing. But it seems like some of those things were sidestepped here, which I think raises some other questions. In what other instances have these standard operating procedures been sidestepped? What other errors in decision-making have been made? Because usually when you have such a grave error like this, it's not like nothing else has happened. It's just like a one-off. I would imagine that whoever... I guess it's the people who got fired who have been the ones doing this. But I would imagine that the reason why they made the mistakes that led to this incident is because they have found ways to get away with making similar mistakes in the past. So hopefully what this will mean is a reversal of that and more care and caution when it comes to doing future strikes. At least that's what I'm hoping. I'm just some American. They have more cliff notes here. In addition to the dismissals, the IDF said a number of military personnel will be formally reprimanded over the grave incident, including the commander of the Southern Command for his overall responsibility for the incident. And that makes sense. The IDF said it had also censured the brigade commander and the 162nd Division commander. The IDF's apologies for the outrageous killing of our colleagues represent cold comfort for the victims, families, and WCK's global family, said the WCK CEO Aaron Gore. There's also a paragraph down here that says the WCK said Israel acknowledging its responsibility and its fatal errors in the deadly attack on our convoy mark important steps forward, but criticized the preliminary investigation for failing to show any cause for its military to have fired upon the convoy. Which is actually a fair point, because you don't have to just say that a mistake was made. Very clearly a mistake was made here, but also they must identify what actually went wrong so that they could fix it. Now, I'm sure that internally they've done this. I would imagine that they have looked at their procedures, identified what mistakes were made internally, and they were like, hey, you guys can't do this. You have to go back to doing the standard operating procedures as we have documented in our system as our typical processes. At least that's what I'm hoping they're doing. I could be wrong. Maybe they're not doing that, but I would imagine that that's what they're doing. Let's see here. The group reiterated its demand for an independent investigation of the incident, adding that, quote, the IDF cannot credibly investigate its own failure in Gaza. I mean, there's a difference between cannot and will not. I think they certainly can, but, when it comes to most incidents, if it's possible, I like to take the word of two organizations rather than just one. Even though I think the IDF has not lied as much as a lot of like the pro-Palestinian homies would like to believe. Still, I think it's important to have, a third-party investigation, a third-party source to corroborate what it is that the IDF is saying here. But they continue. It's not enough to simply try to avoid further humanitarian deaths, which have now approached close to 200, said the group's founder, which, by the way, this war has been going on for like 6 months, so keep that in perspective. All civilians need to be protected, and all innocent people in Gaza need to be fed and safe, and all hostages must be released. Now, shortly after this, the IDF said that they would withdraw all their troops from Gaza, and then they put out another statement saying that it doesn't mean that the war is close to an end. Although I will say that the news that Israel is pulling its troops out of Gaza does appear to be good news. Many analysts I've been hearing in mainstream media have been saying this does sort of signal the beginning of the end when it comes to the war in Gaza. Some people are saying that they're going to go back to primarily using bombs instead of soldiers to, continue going after Hamas. I will say, though, it's important to note that I believe it was last week, Israel announced that they were pulling out of the Al-Shifa hospital after killing 200 some odd Hamas terrorists. Now, I think that leaves the question of exactly how many Hamas terrorists are there left. Like, who else are they trying to get? The Al-Shifa hospital was one of the primary locations that Hamas was using in Gaza. So for them to go in, kill a bunch of baddies, and then leave was already a good sign. Them leaving Gaza is yet another one. So if they're going to bomb more places, curious to see what they're bombing and who they're trying to get. But I would hope that this is signaling the beginning of the end for this war.